I was born in Clinton in 1917. My father was a student at Mississippi College, taught school, and my father was also a minister. We lived in a small house just off the campus. My father bought a farm in Rankin County. We had a dairy farm. It was around 500 acres. The Depression hit and literally wiped us out. We lost the farm, lost everything. We moved several times, and the result was that in those days when a kid came to a new school, he had to either knuckle under or fight the bully, you know. So I fought lots of bullies and survived, thank God.
The White Citizens Council was set up to maintain segregation at all costs. They didn't want to compromise on any issue. They certainly were not in favor of desegregating even one school in Mississippi.
It was inevitable that it was going to happen. And he had the foresight to understand that we needed to do this voluntarily as opposed to being forced. And we needed to do it with the right attitude towards it.
It obviously became impossible, however, from a standpoint of reality, to have a segregated system that just wasn't going to work any longer. The Supreme Court saw that.
The unanimous ruling against racial segregation in the public yesterday will have an impact which cannot at this time be calculated. It not only goes to the heart of one of the acutest of domestic problems, it counts substantially in the great conflict of ideas which now divide and dominate the world.
Divided the whole South in terms of, people being so afraid that we're going to actually have African American kids in our schools.
Mississippi has a long history of ignoring laws.
I would say probably most white people in Mississippi wanted to defy the order of the court.
Changing cultures is difficult, and human nature, we all have to grow. And so I think Brown versus School Board, for myself, and growing up in a segregated society, it was the beginning of you have to start really paying attention to the reality of this and making these changes.
But change is not Mississippi's strong suit, at least when the change involves such traditional institutions as segregation and white supremacy. No political leader dares offer change as one of the alternatives to the present situation.
Joel Blass would stand on the floor of the Mississippi House of Representatives and say the Supreme Court's orders are the law of the land, and even though we may not agree with them, we must respect them and we must obey them. And for that, he was excoriated by the rabid proponents of segregation. But in spite of that, he continued to hold his ground.
Got up to around Meridian and said the little girl needed to go to the bathroom. He said, well, I guess we can go to the courthouse. And Thelma said, no, Mr. Blass said, I know a man up here that has a garage, and we can go to his place.
Thelma got out and went in and found a mechanic who knew where there was a facility for black people. And it had never occurred to me. It had never occurred to me. We went on, and I said, well, it's getting, on toward noon. We better stop somewhere and get something to eat. Thelma spoke up right away. Said, Mr. Blass, we don't have to stop. I made some sandwiches. I knew we were going to hard press for time. He knew we couldn't go in a restaurant and eat together. I didn't think about the fact that we couldn't sit in a restaurant and eat. But we couldn't in those days. They wouldn't have served us at all.
Professor Blass was the only person at the university on the faculty and administration that I had faith in
the late 50s, early 60s. And that's when the civil rights movement really heated up. In the late 60s, it became really angry. Ole Miss Law School was in the middle of it.
The university, it was typical Mississippi. It was important at that time that Professor Blass step up as a leader, and he did.
He was one of the voices that was respected and listened to, and frequently lost because he was on the wrong side of the numbers.
He was on the right side of the issues of the day. Those issues had to do with, we were past actual integration of Ole Miss in the sense that James Meredith had arrived in September of 1962.
I was on the student vote, but they called us up a week ahead before school started to prep us for how we were supposed to handle all this.
I deeply regret the fact that any action by the executive branch was necessary in this case. But all other avenues and alternatives, including persuasion and conciliation, had been tried and exhausted. Had the police powers of Mississippi been used to support the orders of the court instead of deliberately and unlawfully blocking them, had the University of Mississippi fulfilled its standard of excellence by quietly admitting this applicant in conformity with what so many other southern state universities have done for so many years, a peaceable and sensible solution would have been possible without any federal intervention.
He weighed what was right and what was equitable.
He was a smart man, he was an honorable man, he was an experienced lawyer. He's just the kind of person that should have been there.
There's no way you can summarize in an hour and 15 minutes or in a day, you know, in a movie or in a book, the influence of great people. So, you know, I feel inadequate to to talk about the impact and the meaning of a person whose influence on my life was like a saint. I mean, I think of him that way.
I personally believe that God is love, and that all that matters in life ultimately comes from God, and therefore it's love-based. And so I think that probably Mr. Blass, his life was so love-based that he lived the life God would have us live, as flawed as he was, as we all are. He lived a life of love.